You can't even cook properly. Bring me my food now, yelled my husband, Eric, as he walked into the kitchen and saw the half-finished dishes. His face was tight with anger. You're making Mom crazy with how careless you are. Just then, a stack of plates fell off the table and shattered on the floor. Eric didn't even flinch. This is your fault, he said calmly. You shouldn't have stacked them like that. He turned and walked out of the kitchen. Hearing the crash, my father-in-law, Mr. Carter, rushed in. Is everything okay? He asked, looking at me with concern. Then his expression changed, and he became quiet. I'm going to talk to my wife about this. You should come too, he said, his voice low and unsettling. My name is Lisa Bennett, and I'm 32 years old. I've been married to Eric for almost a year now. Before we got married, I worked as a nurse in a small children's clinic. Recently, I switched to a larger hospital in town to build my skills. Even though we're newlyweds, Eric wanted us to live with his mom, Claire, so she wouldn't be alone. His dad works out of town, so he thought it would be good for us to move in and help her. At first, I thought it would bring us closer as a family, but I quickly realized I was wrong. Lisa, you're useless, Claire snapped at me one morning after I finished a night shift. I'd worked from midnight to 8:30 a.m., and was completely exhausted. I walked in the door, ready to sleep, but she started yelling at me. You didn't even make me breakfast. What's wrong with you? She shouted. I made breakfast last night before I left for work, I said, confused. Did Eric eat it all? Instead of listening, she kept complaining. I rubbed my tired eyes and made her breakfast again. When I set it on the table, she frowned. It's too salty, she grumbled, not even saying thank you. I tried to walk away to get some rest, but she stopped me. Hey, where are you going? You still have dishes to clean, she said. I just finished my shift, I said, trying to stay calm. Could you handle it this time? Excuse me? Cleaning is part of cooking, she said sharply. I left the laundry for you too. You can't rest until you finish. I wanted to argue, but I was too tired, so I did the chores she demanded, even though all I wanted was sleep. Claire had also started dropping hints about grandchildren, saying things like, once you have a baby, I'll take care of all the housework. It was clear she was pressuring me to get pregnant. Eric is her only child, so she's obsessed with the idea of having grandkids. She compares me to other women, saying, my friend's daughter-in-law had a baby on her honeymoon, or another has 3 kids already. I'm so jealous. I wanted kids too, but despite all our efforts, taking vitamins, visiting fertility doctors, I wasn't getting pregnant. One day, I asked Eric to join me for a fertility consultation. The doctor needs us both to come in on Saturday morning. Can you make time? I asked. Why, what does that have to do with me? He asked, looking annoyed. The doctor said it's important to check both of us. I explained, your reproductive health matters too. But Eric frowned. Why don't you handle it on your own? It's not my problem. It is your problem, I said, frustrated. Your mom asks me about it constantly, and we need to figure this out together. Eric glared at me. Don't talk about my mom like that. This is your fault. You're the one who's infertile. Fix it. I felt crushed. I need your help to fix it, I said quietly. The doctor said we need to test both of us. I don't need a test, Eric shot back. I'm fine. I have plenty of sperm. Then prove it, I said firmly. But he just scoffed. I'm not going to humiliate myself like that. Stop asking. After that, he pulled the blanket over his head, refusing to talk anymore. I sat on the edge of the bed, feeling completely defeated. She never pressured me or expected me to do housework before. I can't help but wonder if things changed because of my fertility problems. When I first got married, I was healthy and a little curvy, but now I'm skinny and pale. I look unwell, but my husband and mother-in-law don't seem to notice. Maybe it's because they see me every day and don't realize how much I've changed. One summer day, my husband, Ben, came to me with a cheerful tone. We're celebrating my mom's 60th birthday this Sunday, he said. She's inviting lots of friends, so I need you to handle the preparations. He handed me a paper with a guest list, menu, and detailed instructions written in his mom's handwriting. She even included the kind of dishes and wine she wanted and how the food should be served. I stared at the long list. 10 people? That's a lot of food, and it's right after my late shift, I said, worried. Mom said Sunday works best for her. Ben replied, you'll be fine, it's at noon, and you're always awake by then. Then he walked off, leaving me stunned. I knew neither of them would help. The morning of the party arrived, and I was exhausted from my late shift. I had done the cleaning and laundry the night before, but Ben had eaten some of the food I prepped, so I had to rush to the store before starting on the main course. Guests began arriving while I was still trying to get everything ready. My mother-in-law, Evelyn, greeted them warmly, showing them around in her best dress. Meanwhile, I scrambled to prepare drinks and appetizers. As they chatted and laughed, I worked in a panic to finish the main course. "What's taking so long, Lisa?" Ben yelled from the dining room. "Mom's getting mad." Just then, he came into the kitchen, scowling at me for not being finished. "You can't even get the food ready on time," he snapped. Then he grabbed a bottle of wine and left. As I hurried to finish, a stack of plates slipped off the counter and shattered on the floor. They were Evelyn's favorite plates. Ben came back and glanced at the mess. "That's your fault for stacking them like that," he said calmly before leaving again. He didn't even help. I crouched down, picking up the broken pieces. Tears welled up as I muttered, "Why do I always have to do everything?" "Are you okay?" a voice asked gently. I turned and saw my father-in-law, Alan, standing at the door with a box in his hands. He must have heard the plates break. "Did you hurt yourself?" he asked, his kind words almost making me cry. It had been so long since anyone here had spoken to me like that. Alan knelt down and helped me pick up the broken plates. Then he looked at the food spread across the kitchen. "Did you make all this by yourself?" he asked, surprised. "It's always like this," I said, trying to sound indifferent as I stood up with the shards in my hands. Alan's expression changed as he looked at me closely. I was pale, my hair thin and messy, and dark circles shadowed my eyes. I wasn't the lively person I'd been when he last saw me. He glanced at the mountain of tasks I had yet to finish, then at my worn-out face. His surprise turned to anger. "I'm going to talk to Evelyn about this," he said in a firm voice. "Come with me." "I still need to do the dishes," I protested weakly. "Leave them," Alan said sharply. Before I could resist, he gently guided me to the living room. Evelyn was laughing with her guests and pouring wine from the bottle Ben had brought. "Lisa, what's taking so long?" Evelyn snapped when she saw me. Then she brightened as she noticed Alan. "Everyone, this is my husband, Alan. He works out of town but came home just for my birthday," she announced proudly. The guests smiled and greeted him. Alan nodded politely. "Thank you for coming," he said. Then, looking at Evelyn, he added, "My foolish wife appreciates your company." "Oh, Alan," Evelyn laughed nervously. "It's my birthday, and you're calling me foolish." "You are foolish," Alan said seriously, silencing the room. Evelyn stared at him, shocked. Alan placed a hand on my shoulder and brought me forward. "I want to introduce you to my son's wife, Lisa," he said, his voice calm but stern. "Oh, Alan, Lisa is busy," Evelyn began, but Alan's sharp glare stopped her mid-sentence. "A year and a half ago, she married my son. She was once a cheerful young lady, always smiling, and I was sure she and my son would have a bright future, but look at her now," Alan concluded, his voice full of concern. Some of the guests began whispering, commenting on how different I looked from my photos. "She doesn't look anything like her pictures," one murmured. "She's way too skinny," another added. Alan turned to Evelyn and asked firmly, "Why has she changed so much?" Evelyn hesitated before replying, "Well, I don't know. Maybe it's because work is too stressful. You know, I told you she switched hospitals and started working night shifts earlier this year." Alan frowned. "So, are all of Lisa's colleagues dealing with this? If so, it's a violation of labor laws. I'll contact the union." Evelyn stammered, "No, that's not." But Alan cut her off sharply. "Are you still pretending to be unaware? I've heard you've been pushing Lisa too hard, not giving her any time to rest. She worked a late shift last night and then had to cook all of this on no sleep." That was the truth. I had told Alan everything. For the past 6 months, I had been treated like a servant with no breaks. Evelyn turned her head, unable to argue. Alan glared at my husband. "And you, Mark, you knew Lisa was going through this, so why didn't you do anything?" Mark tried to defend himself. "It's between Lisa and Mom. It's not my business." Alan raised his voice. "What did you promise at the wedding? Didn't you vow to protect and support her? Does she look happy to you?" Mark stammered. "Well, I thought it was a bit much, but Mom said it was normal for a woman without children to do all this." Alan shook his head in disbelief. "As a husband, you should prioritize your partner, not your mother. Don't you remember how your first marriage ended when you treated her the same way?" Mark's face turned bright red. I stared at him, shocked. I had known he had been divorced before, but I didn't realize how badly he had treated his ex-wife. Everything finally clicked. Suddenly, Evelyn shouted, "Let me tell you something. This is the kind of work she should be doing as a woman without kids. It's been a year since they married, and she still hasn't had a baby. She's an unfit wife." Alan's voice turned cold. "Even if she were infertile, you can't blame her for that. You're just taking it out on her." Evelyn snapped. "What? How dare you? You've been gone so long. What do you know about any of this? Everyone else brags about their grandchildren, and I'm the only one without any. I'm lonely. I need a grandchild." As Evelyn burst into tears, I felt a fleeting sympathy for her, but it didn't erase the pain she and Mark had caused me over the last 6 months, especially since she had treated Mark's ex-wife the same way. I looked her in the eye and said firmly, "I don't think you'll be getting any grandchildren anytime soon." I pulled out some papers I had from a fertility clinic. "These are my test results, blood tests, AMH levels, everything checked out fine. My body is normal." "If Mark's ex-wife had the same issue, can you guess what's wrong?" I asked sharply. "The problem is with Mark." I turned to look at Mark. "Huh?" he stammered. "You had a feeling, didn't you? That's why you didn't want to get tested. Instead of protecting me, you treated me like a servant, just like your mother does. I loved you, so I kept the results to myself. But after today, after you yelled at me and refused to help, I just don't care anymore. And now I know you treated your ex-wife horribly, too. I'm done." Wait, Mark begged. "It can't be true. I can't be infertile." "Then why don't you get tested?" I shot back. "But honestly, it doesn't matter to me anymore." With those final words, I turned my back on my shouting husband and crying mother-in-law and walked out of the living room. Before closing the door, I heard the guests quietly leaving. Later, Mark and I officially divorced. Despite his protests, Alan's recording of our conversation proved the emotional abuse I had endured from both him and Evelyn. Mark underwent a sperm analysis and found out he had oligospermia, leading Evelyn to blame him. After our divorce, Mark's parents ended up getting a divorce too. I had hoped Evelyn and Mark would change after the way they treated me, but they didn't. Alan later apologized for not understanding sooner and for not encouraging Mark to get tested before we married. A rumor spread about Evelyn now living with Mark in public housing. After losing most of her friends, the details of the situation became public, and Mark faced shame at work. Alan later introduced me to a man who worked with him. After dating for 6 months, I remarried a kind and reliable man. Just recently, I had a checkup with my doctor and found out I'm 2 months pregnant. I can't wait to visit Alan soon to share the news. After all, he's the one who helped me escape that awful situation.